here at Lake Erie Metroparks Marshlands Museum. Thanks for joining me again today. I want to do a video with you on bird identification. This is going to partner, I think, pretty well with the Binoculars 101 presentation that's already been uploaded to metroparks.com. And I think watching those two videos together is really going to get you going in the right direction when it comes to this wonderful hobby called birding. So once you know how to use your binoculars and once you know how to think about identifying a bird, you're off to the races. Before we get started, I want to drop one phrase right out there right away. It's called a field mark. And the idea behind a field mark is really nothing new. You do this every day. It's just a function of how are you actually doing it. So I want to give you an absolutely preposterous example. All right, so this is a steak knife, and you're in the dining room and you're ready to sit down and eat your steak, and you realize that there's no steak knives on the table, so you ask someone, hey, can you bring the steak knives? And someone comes back with a spatula. It's not going to happen. Nobody is going to confuse a steak knife with a spatula. Whether you know it or not, you just used field marks. They both have plastic handles. They both have a flat piece, but the flat piece is completely different. This one's really broad, doesn't have a cutting edge on it. This one's very thin, has a cutting edge. This blade is actually twisted to the angle of the handle. This one lines up with the handle. I could go on all day separating the two. You're not going to confuse these. It's a field mark. You're looking at the shape, you're looking at the handle, you're looking at the blade. You use field marks with your car too. So for example, I drive a blue Chevy Equinox. If I were to go out into a parking lot where there's 100 blue Chevy Equinoxes, I'll find mine. Mine is always covered with dirt because I live on a dirt road. It has a Metroparks sticker in the corner. Yours should too. But most importantly, the critical field mark that separates my Equinox from everybody else's is the license plate. So we can consider the license plate as a unique field mark to my car. So when it comes to wildlife, scientists like to put things in order. They want to put like things with like things. So for example, let's say your critter has hair. If your animal has hair, we're going to call it a mammal, and we're going to put it over here in this group called mammals. Okay? Birds are the same way. Once you know your animal has feathers, we're going to call it a bird, and we're going to put it into its own group. So mammals are over here and birds are over there. But once you've got birds in their own group, if you look at it from the scale of the whole planet, you have over 10,000 birds to choose from. So just to call it a bird doesn't work. So scientists take it one step farther and they start to look at the beaks and the feet. So the beaks and the feet become one of the first major subdivisions of our birds. So when it comes to bird identification, ducks are actually a great place to start. You look at it, you figure it's got feathers, so you know it's got to be a bird. You know it's got beaks and feet that are different than everybody else's. So if you've got your webbed feet and your long, flat, wide beak, it's going to be a duck or a goose or a swan. It's that straightforward. Once you know what kind of bird it is, you've eliminated a lot of your other options and you're focusing on a smaller group of birds to help you figure out what the bird is that's sitting right there in front of you. Okay? So beaks and feet get you started. We'll contrast that with something like the American robin, which I'm sure is familiar to most of you. The feet are not webbed. The bill is not for picking through the water and eating small insects and plants. These are what we call passerine feet. They're running feet. They're perching feet. This bill right here is actually kind of like it's almost like a Leatherman tool. It's a multi-purpose tool. So they can eat berries, they can eat worms, and that sort of thing. So this bird is clearly different than these, just based on beaks and feet. We're going to put it in a completely different group. We're going to call it a thrush. So I could go on and on with my other examples, but I think you get the point so far. Look at beaks and look at feet. That's a good starting point. Another thing to look at, and quite frankly, there are times when it's even easier than looking at beaks and feet, This is just a look at the bird. Just look at it. And you're going to start to see colors and you're going to start to see patterns. This one's a no-brainer. It's a mallard duck. I bet you a lot of you knew it was a mallard duck. But just look at it. Really take a minute and examine the bird. It's got a darker head. It's got a white collar around its neck. It's got a brown chest. Well, guess what? There's only one bird in North America that has that trait, that has that series of field marks, and it's the mallard duck. Look at this one, though. Is it a duck? Well, sure, because it's got a smaller bill. It's got the webbed feet. But the colors are different, and the size is different, too. So looking at the colors and patterns, it's got a lighter colored chest with a darker head and a green stripe coming through its eye. And if I take the bird and I turn it just a squeak, you can look right there on the back of its wings, right along here, and there's actually a patch of green. And when it opens up that wing, that green patch is right there. Green on the wing actually tells us, by golly, it's a green-winged teal. So looking at the actual physical marks on these birds, these field marks are going to point you in the right direction for putting a name to your bird. Here at Lake Erie Metropark, without even trying, over the course of a good calendar year, you'll easily find 20 different species of waterfowl in this park. Easily. It's just a matter of figuring out the field marks to finding out who they actually are. So just quick review so far. Look at the bird. What sort of colors and patterns do you have? Looking at their beak and their feet to figure out which kind of bird it is in a general sense. Something else you can actually key in on is the behavior of the bird. So this one right here is actually called a red-bellied woodpecker. Now my hunch is that some of you saw the red on the head and thought, oh, hey, that's actually a red-headed woodpecker. It's not. It's a red-bellied woodpecker, and it has just a little bit of red on its belly. The truth is, a lot of birds, woodpeckers specifically, have reds on their head. But in the case of the red-headed woodpecker, it literally looks like you just dunked it in paint and pulled out a red-headed bird. So when it comes to the red-bellied woodpecker, they do also have red on their heads. A little bit of red on their belly as well. But what is the major difference between the woodpecker and, say, the green-winged teal? Its behavior. What is it actually doing? Most of your ducks are actually swimming in the water. They could be out in the lake, they could be out in the marshes. Where are you going to find a red-headed woodpecker? You're going to find it in the woods, and you're going to find it stuck on the side of the tree. Their beak is all about drilling holes in the tree. But if they can't hold themselves to the tree, the beak isn't going to do them any good. So they don't have webbed feet because they don't need to swim. They're actually going to have a special toe arrangement that helps them stick to the side of the tree. So you'll find these guys swimming through the water. You find these guys stuck on the side of the tree. In the case of the robin, you'll see them running across your front yard. You don't see the robin flying out over the lake and dropping into the water and grabbing a fish. Robins don't do that. So behavior is a very, very legitimate clue to your bird's identity as well as the location. Water, in your front yard, in the woods, all right? Sometimes you've got to look really closely at some of these birds because the truth is not all these birds are going to be this big. A lot of birds are actually a lot smaller. So this is where your binoculars really come in handy and you can start looking for the real finer field marks on these birds. So looking at this one here, for example, this one's called a common yellowthroat, and they're one of the few warblers that actually nests in this park. And as you can tell, it's a yellow bird and it's got a black mask, kind of like the Lone Ranger, and they're hiding out in the marshes. They're not necessarily easy to see, but when you do, guess what? It's the only bird you're going to see in Michigan that's small and yellow and has a black mask. So the size is a key, the colors are a key, the habitat is a key. All of them can get you pointed in the right direction. This one is a little bit different. It's also a warbler. These two birds aren't like anybody else up here. Their beaks are little tiny things for picking at insects out of the leaves and out of the flowers that are up in those treetops. When it comes to this bird, it happens to be called a chestnut-sided warbler, and if you look on its sides, hey, it's brown. and it also has a yellow cap, and it also has a white chest. There's no other bird in North America that has that. So when you're in your backyard using your binoculars and you see a bird in the treetop that's this big and has a white belly and the brown sides and the yellow cap, it can only be the chestnut-sided warbler. So these strategies work with any bird. It doesn't matter. Look at its size. Look at its beaks and feet. Get a feel for what kind of bird it is. Look at its colors and patterns. Look at its location. Is it in your backyard or is it out in a marsh? Once you've got an idea of what field marks the birds have presented, you now have to figure out what the bird really is, and that's where your field guide comes into play. I started birding in 1991, and this was the bird book that I had to use. It was the Peterson Field Guide. Absolutely life-altering book here for me, because I got so interested in birds. Eventually, I realized I needed a bigger, better field guide, so I moved on to the National Geographic book, and then they come out with a different series. And then in 2000, an artist and ornithologist by the name of David Sibley came out with the Sibley Guide. Birders were so demanding of a new book that when he came out with this, it just kept flying off the shelves so quickly. It literally landed on the New York Times bestseller list, a bird guide. So once you've got your bird guide, it's a simple matter of thumbing through the pages and finding out what bird it is. When the ornithologists, the people study birds, put the birds in the field guides, they clump them together and they keep them there. So all your ducks are in one place. All your birds of prey are in one place. All your warblers are all in one place. So it's a simple matter of finding that section in the book and then trolling through the pages trying to figure out which one matches your bird. That's how bird watching has been done in this country since the 30s when this book first came out. Well, now we're in a new world with the internet and smartphones. So you can actually get applications on your phone that will do a lot of this work for you. So for example, you can get the Audubon Bird Guide app. I personally use iBird Pro. I don't know why I use it over this one, I just do. And if you really had to go and use the Peterson, you can, because it's all stuffed into your phone now if you purchase the app. But here's where these get different compared to a field guide. You can literally open up the app and you can pull open the menu and start putting this information into your phone. So you can literally scroll through it and say, I've got a duck, and the dominant color might be brown and white and a little bit of green, and it's hanging out in a marsh. And the software will figure out what you have. And then maybe there's other examples that might fit that very primitive description. It will show you all the pictures of the birds that match the information that you put in, and it's just a matter of you picking through maybe 10 or 15 images instead of over 1,000 images, which is the number of birds that have been seen in North America. So whether it's a smartphone app or whether it's a book, look at your bird and then start trolling through the images in the book or on the phone and finding out what is the match. It's really that simple. You may find yourself in a world where you just can't get it. You're not sure what your bird is. What is it? What is it? I don't know. I don't know. Well, you can ask Kevin, because we're going to have the Ask Kevin series. You can send him an email and we'll get it figured out for you. The worst that'll happen is we'll say we don't know. But there's a pretty good chance we're going to know, because enough of us have been paying enough attention to birds for a long enough time. We've got a pretty good grip on how this works. Don't be afraid to take a picture. So maybe you've got a bird coming to your feeder. You can take your smartphone, and it could be a bad photograph. We don't care. Sometimes there's enough information in even a bad photograph to tell us what your bird is, and then we'll get back with you. So don't forget the Ask Kevin series, okay? So when it comes to bird identification, it's really pretty straightforward. You've been doing this sort of thing for a long time. Study your bird, look it up in a book, look it up on your iPhone and see what you get. And don't hesitate to ask us if you have questions. All right? Have a good day. We'll see you later.